right. Let's go to Flip on Skype. Hi.
Hello, Art.
Hello.
I had a quick question for Mr. Starr. What would happen if somebody were to hijack a commercial airliner and crash it into a nuclear power plant?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I think there have been studies to show that that could cause a lot of problems. Maybe the biggest problem is not recognized. The spent fuel pools that I mentioned that are each reactor stores all their used fuel rods on site in like a stainless steel lined swimming pool. It's about 40 feet deep, the size of a tennis court. A lot of the buildings that house those are just like concrete block. They're like the buildings that would house chemical. They're not a heavy duty. They're not built to the same standards like a containment vessel. And a plane crashing into that could easily cause a massive release of radioactivity if it destroyed the cooling system on the pool or breached the pool and allowed the cooling water to be released.
Okay, well, I understand that in Fukushima, what really was their undoing was the fact that the diesel generators that had to be maintained, and they did have them, were down below ground. And so, of course, they flooded, so no power. Now,
that's right. Well, and there's another thing, too. You can scram a nuclear power plant and shut down the fission.
Yes.
But there's still an enormous amount of heat that's still there that's going to, you have to keep cooling the core. And when they lost all the off-site power, too, and their cooling systems that were, flooded, they lost the ability to cool the reactor core. And so they melted. And honestly, the Japanese knew damn well that all of those reactors had melted down within the first couple of days of the accident. They actually watched a cloud of radioactivity travel over Japan. It even went over Tokyo. And they didn't warn anybody. I mean, it reminded me of when they had the nuclear weapons test in the United States and didn't warn people, not to drink the milk and all that. So, yeah, sorry, I would get on a little bit of rant there, but it still makes me mad whenever I see those sorts of things happening.
I remember back in the 80s, I worked for a large station in Las Vegas, KWN, and I would have to go on the air every now and then and say, people in precarious positions and, window washers and all those kinds of people, please be aware that in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it was, there's going to be a detonation at the test site. And sure enough, there would be a detonation. And when there was, we would rock back and forth. The building would go back and forth. Oh, yes. Yes. I was around for that.
Well, a lot of those underground tests actually vented and released huge amounts of radioactivity. The cancer rates there in Utah were just astronomical.
I was going to say, fortunately for us and unfortunately for Utah, that's the direction it went. Glenn on Skype, you're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Okay, if we say that hypothetically, for argument's sake, that city busters are passé, what about things like dialable yield neutron micronukes or cobalt-60 dirty bombs or depleted uranium munitions? We still have plenty of ways to mess things up, but especially the dialable yield neutron tactical nuclear weapons. What do you think about that? Have we seen them used even, perhaps?
Well, the variable yield or dial yield weapons, those would be like the B-61 weapons that we have a couple hundred, I think 180 of those deployed over in Europe now at 6 or 7 different NATO bases. I don't know if I'm not aware that any have actually been used, but keep in mind that there's a difference when you talk about a nuclear detonation. That means like on a Sagad, fission and fireball, and that's different than a dirty bomb. Is a conventional bomb that spreads, that blows radioactive substance apart and can contaminate an area. Mm-hmm. The DU weapons they're a radiological weapon, depleted uranium. They don't have a nuclear detonation, but when they fire them, about up to 70% of the round actually burns when it strikes a target, and it releases microparticles of uranium that can be inhaled and ingested very easily. So all these weapons The radioactivity, I think, is a really vicious kind of problem to leave in an environment, and I think it really should be considered a criminal. It should be banned. We certainly shouldn't be using DU weapons.
Okay, Professor Raymond sends the following by computer. Art, if nuclear warheads are not cycled out after so many years, the danger is they can have electronic malfunctions, and that includes the final guidance in the MERV warheads, non-detonation and early detonation. The Demon Core incident went critical.
Well, they have a schedule where they refurbish plutonium pits. The plutonium itself is considered to be stable for like about a century or so. But Tantex, they take weapons apart and they will refurbish. There's a schedule for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the United States has spent enough money to maintain its weapons that there's really very little doubt about. There may be some questions at some point about what the total yield would be if it's going to be as accurate or quite as precise as they would like, but there's no doubt that they'll work.
Okay, let's go to Mount Pleasant. Hello.
Yes, Art.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Wade in Tennessee, and I don't believe you want call signs on there, but I am a ham, and I've got a question for you and Stephen.
All right.
Okay, well, actually, it's two real quick ones. First of all, going back to EMPs. I know our transistorized radios would be fried, but what about the tube-type radios? That's number one. And number two...
let's start with number one. Tube-type radios, sir, would survive, but whether there'd be anybody to run them or not is another question.
Okay. The second one, we have go boxes and emergency kits and so forth. If the radios were in the cases, not hooked to an antenna and not hooked to a power source, do you think the transistorized radios would survive?
Good question. Very good question, actually. So could you protect, I guess it would depend on how close the detonation was.
Yeah, I'd say so. I haven't done a lot of calculations. I read about what they call it, a Faraday cage and that sorts of things you can use to protect for EMP. And, who knows? I mean, if it really comes down to it, who knows what will happen. But it just, my friend Colonel Urinich always used to say, he said, remember, he says, our weapons are guaranteed. That was kind of a chilling thing, but I think that they put so much time and effort into this. There's a good chance that some of them won't work, and there's a good chance that some of them wouldn't be launched because people would disobey orders. But the hell of it is that there's still enough of them out there. Like with one Trident sub, if they launched all their missiles and they have independently targeted warheads, there'd be at least 90 to up to 200 warheads that could hit a target. We have, 12 subs like that, and so there's not a shortage of nuclear weapons. The U.S. and Russia, the U.S. has 7,000, Russia has maybe 8,000. But all it takes really is a few hundred strategic weapons to destroy like every city. There's only 200 or 300 cities in the United States and Russia that have populations of greater than like 250,000 or so. And there's thousands of nuclear warheads. So, even though they've dismantled, there was 70,000 or so in 1986. They've gotten rid of 2/3 or 3/4 of them. They've dismantled the weapons. They actually have kept the plutonium pits. So that's another reason why we don't need to make more pits. They've got, 30,000 in storage right now. But, they're, even at that, what they didn't know all along, they didn't know these scientific studies that predicted that the environmental consequences of nuclear war are so severe that it basically wrecks the biosphere. It leaves Earth uninhabitable long enough where most people and animals probably wouldn't survive.
Or want to.